Hey, so I've been meaning to talk on Krishna Reddy. There's an exhibit on Map at Map, and let me just talk about compile some of these thoughts because I went to the opening, and this time I had a membership, so I could go to the exclusive preview or whatever, and meet the it's just the art community in Bangalore, people who come, and I've seen them in other galleries, but then having all of these people in the same room in that cramped space, it was an interesting experience. And then I revisited the exhibit many times, and I've been able to sort of engage with the work, as you can see, in a manner very different from any other visitor, because I've been really trying to understand why this work is there, what it is for, and honestly, I've never done intaglio. I've only done a very different kind of printing, but so it was a very informative educational experience. I think that's what I'm going to focus on. Their role as an educator, the artist as an educator, and therefore their art as a pedagogical practice. Because I feel like their art in many ways, it's very useful to talk about how art can be done, what are some near close to objective ways in which you can get good art. It's a very controversial thing to say, but at least if you just do art as a hobby, that's one thing, but I feel like if you study art, then there are all of these principles that come in and you can use them and create something. Of course, you can arrive at these principles on your own, but then if you also study them and use them, then it's helpful. So I feel like their art in particular has all of these principles, and I guess that's what I wanted to talk about. So I initially, normally I write it on, I just type it out. But this time I was like, okay, let me write it down because there are some things that I need to draw out. And maybe eventually, if somebody is willing to commission me to write this whole piece and compile these thoughts and organize them, give them a beautiful structure, an elegant narrative, and so on, then that'll happen. Otherwise, this is all I'm going to do because I never wanted to do this actually because it was mostly for me to think about the exhibit. And now that I've thought about it, I was like, okay, I'm done. And if no one's going to pay me, then there's no point in writing this for it. There's no audience at all. But then I just got an email from App saying, okay, if you want to write, then send us a pitch and so on. And then I was like, okay, I can't do a pitch. There's a lot to talk about. So let me just finish this up. Let me just close this chapter and then move on to other people and other exhibits. So let me hold it. I'm re examining the art of Krishna Reddy from a preliminary engagement with the proofs and prints on display at Map Bangalore. I initially lacked the insights needed to appreciate the work until I started thinking about the art in a mathematical way. The reason this happened is I asked the curator about the art, about the colors. There's a lot of number symbology. If you look at the sculptures, demonstrators, there are seven. And if you keep looking at the use of numbers, like how many figures are there in a particular setting, and a lot of artists throughout, a lot of philosophers actually have talked about mysticism and in relation to numbers. So if I have seven here, then to create a pyramid I would have six and so on. Or the you sort of get it, right? Like the Pythagorean 10, the triangle. So these elements I see in their work. And let me just so I asked about the color associations and the grids and all of that, and then the curator was like, "You can't read it like this. It's not mathematics." But for me, art and mathematics are the same. So, of course, I'm going to look at it in this way, and I'm going to figure out what these colors mean, what these grids mean, why. It's like, okay, there's this particular piece looking at a cramped figure like this, and then finally they expose, and then you can see it's a pentagonal structure. There's a beautiful pentagon right there, and you can't use the pentagon without invoking sacred geometry principles and so on. And then the ratio over there is in the harmonic series, some of the grids. So they're very interesting because throughout the ages, this is how these particular themes are talked about using those particular grids. It's a one-to-one relationship. So you can't say that the artist is doing something very subjective over here, because they're literally referencing very particular ideas, ideologies about life, about visual art, about actually tantra, and let's just say sacred geometry in that sense. um so my first time I this was done at the opening preview. I saw that there were too many people, and then somehow my pen wasn't working. As you can see, like, it's fading out, in and out, in and out. And I was like, oh, I don't have much to draw, so I'm just going to draw this soul sculpture. Every other thing is like a proof of print. It's on the hanging on the wall, and then there's one exhibit that you can, for tactile engagement, accessibility and so on. But this was the sculpture over there, and I was like, okay. And these motifs are very important. And so let me just maybe think about why it's called rhyme unbroken. My first thought was, okay, what is a poem, right? It's very hard for me to describe what a poem is. But then if I generalize that, and then somehow try to understand what a rhyme is, at least that has some structure, something to talk about. Like, there's a meter, there's rhyme, and all of these other aspects of a poem, not necessarily present in every single poem, but they could be features of a poem. And something that came to me was like, okay, there's a metaphor that's recurring. And when it recurs throughout, let's say in the case of Krishna Reddy, throughout their life, then that could mean a rhyme unbroken. Because if a rhyme is executed beautifully, then it stands out as an epitome. Something amazing has happened, we just witnessed it. And it's like, wow, applause, bravissimo, you just want to applaud that. But then they do it again and again and again and again, and throughout their life they keep working with that metaphor, with that motif. And I feel like maybe that's what rhyme unbroken means, that there is a continuity. There's like a you get where I'm going with that. So I don't know what the thoughts were behind the title when you title this exhibit rhyme unbroken, but that's how I would interpret it. So one of the things that this is the Great Clown, I believe. I drew a lot of them, but I forgot to title it, and because the title was going to clash visually. And um, you can see over here the clown is the protagonist, but the viewer, the fourth wall is broken through the use of perspective, and you are the clown. You are the great clown in this particular painting, and you're juggling these, and you have skewers, like how you would barbecue something, and then these clown noses are present there. And it's actually very interesting to me because I have this great fascination with clowning. I want to go to L'École Gaulier and study clowning. Like, there's a course, if you've seen The Dictator, them, Sacha Baron Cohen, they studied under Philippe Collier, and I want to engage with their ideas. And some of their influences on theater. It's like a bit, how do you say it, it's a bit radical. And how there's an established tradition, and then you break that tradition, and then you see something in a new light, a new perspective. So a lot of that comes in there. Buffon being a buffoon, but also theater over there is taken, I think, very seriously. It's like life or death. It's not a game, but it's supposed to be played like a game, but it's not a game. So there's this, it's a very confusing um it's a very confusing terrain, clowning, but it's also very powerful. If you look at the archetype of the fool gesture, the kind of power they had in, let's say, the courts, or the power or the role in society. And if you talk about some more indigenous and shamanistic ideas about the sacred clown, how you're initiated into the act of clowning, how you become a fool, how you entertain, and so on and so forth. I'll come back to this particular one because this is my second favorite one. My favorite one, I believe, is the Vision 1969, and I hope I'm getting the dates right because I'm telling this off the memory. I haven't written this down anywhere, but it's it's showed around the demonstrators, next to the demonstrators. I think that's 1968. So that's why I think the vision is 1969. I really love the color scheme on the vision, the orange and the dark murky greens. And I feel like one of the first things I told the curator on the opening was that, or rather I asked, was the artist trying to achieve abstraction? Like if I look at a Gaitonde, if I look at a Raza, and if I compare that to maybe MF Hussain, then, there's like different levels of abstraction. If I look at a Rothko, then if many people, including myself, would place that into the ideal realm of abstraction. And it's not like expressionist, it's not, I'm not trying to create a calligraphic mark, I'm not trying to create an imprint, I'm achieving a color field effect. And for me, that's how I would place the epitome of the highest ideal of any abstract art. I feel like that moment when the colors become alive and they start, creating that ambiguity, that murkiness in ground relationships. That's when I feel like, okay, this has entered into the realm of abstraction, and now we can talk about how good of an abstract art work this is or not. If you stand in front of a Pollock, it's very strong in the lines. If I create, strong lines everywhere, then I can create harmony, I can create rhythm, I can create balance. And essentially, what I've done is entered into the realm of abstraction. But I'm not going to go beyond that because I'm relying on so many compositional tools that I've forgotten the relationships of ground, and that play needs to be there. And that's something you can see in Rothko and Gaitonde, in fact, too. And over here, you can't. Literally, it's because the artist uses perspective so strongly that all of the ground relationships are actually quite fixed and established. And I think the vision was one particular exception to this entire thing, because even though there are recognizable figures, right, there are all of these standing, um, I think, like demonstrators, protesters. I don't really know what exactly they symbolize, but they're all standing in a sequence and they all have their particular character. I will show you that soon. But I really love that particular work, and if I could afford it, I would own it. Not a different proof of print, exactly the one that I saw, because that's what I experienced. Um, it's almost like a spiritual, mystical phenomena in my body, in my blood, a psychosomatically enlightening experience. And that's the kind of work that I want to own, honestly. So we'll come back to this, but one of the few things I want to point out, or I want you to notice, is that there's this arch over here. There's presumably audience seated there, and then you can see the repetition of this particular, we, and I hear when I try to play back this sound to myself, I hear applause. So in a synesthesia kind of context, you can feel like there's an applause going around here, and then there are all of these swooshes and whooshes, strong verticals, strong horizontals, and heavy perspective. These are some of the things that characterize the art. So I was thinking, why is the arch over there? And I look at a lot of religious iconography, and I think, okay, you have this particular motif. There's an arch over there. There are usually dancers. There are apsaras. There are different kind of deities. There's sometimes even frills and patterns and um, floral motifs, natural motifs. Oh, my hand hurts from holding this, but I will try. I'll try my best. So I thought maybe that's what the arch is for. Okay. Is there no way I can do this? Just to make it okay, I'll just speak for now, and then I will show you whenever I want to talk about something in particular. So of course, then I'm like thinking about the mystical significance of numbers, and especially when you do something figurative, when you have recognizable figures, what happens is the numbers become natural numbers. You don't have to enter rational numbers or fractions or complex numbers, nothing. It's very natural values, basically. Then of course the idea of the ellipse will come back to that, because in the Sacred Clown also, I believe that there's a very strong ellipse, this elliptical surface. And what is actually happening over here is the movement is shown. um, Krishna Reddy creates a very meticulous space. Through this perspective, it's almost obsessive, but also it's very like OCD type kind of a space where you enter the space, you've created it with perspective. Now all of the lines have to comply with that domain. That's why I read their works as a mathematical structure, because like when they're studying, of course, you're getting a lot of inspiration from the organic natural world, and there is so much mathematics already there. So of course, when you put it into the visual art domain, you're going to have a consistent space, a continuous space. And it's not like a lot of the works that I've seen. It's almost Escher like in the consistency. I'm not talking about the patterning or the tiling. I'm talking about the rules of the space. And they work with that. Like, one of the times when I see that human figuration broken. Normally, it's like a pinhead figure, a pinball head, and bony legs like stilts, like a person or a performer walking on stilts. That's how the legs are abstracted, and so the abstraction also is very geometric. But in, I think, Apu's world, those kind of series, the figure, there's still some figuration. And in the seated figure and the running figures, there's only one seated, and then there are multiple ones running, and it could be seen as the same person running throughout space. And you can see how the perspective is maintained in the movement. Throughout the movement, you can still see that the figure complies with the rules of the space. So that is what I call like a constructive space, and the rules of perspective are there. Then I also see a lot of fluid dynamics, and it sort of evokes in generative algorithms and how distribution of the spatial elements occur. So if you see this great clown, right, this orange one is particularly coming out, and you can see that they hug the perspective lines. For some reason, the grid lines are strongly seen. So when I use grids in my composition, I use them, but then I hide it. I cover up the grid so that you get a beautiful composition or something, but then you don't know exactly why it's beautiful. You're not able to articulate it to yourself until you imagine, okay, there are these grid lines, and then if there's a particular connection over here between these two shapes, then okay, that falls at a particular point. It's 1/3 of the screen, or it's at the golden ratio. It's like you arrange these elements to fall on the grids, but that's not the case here. The grid lines are very much part of the, I mean, they're almost dominating the composition in this particular case in Krishna Reddy's art. What else did I want to say? So I immediately obviously noticed the clown motif metaphor, and we'll come back to that archetype. So one of the rules that I've seen in art often touted, okay, the left hemisphere can take more visual weight, and that's also something that they use. Then this is coming from a graphological reading, like when you do handwriting analysis. So you try to understand, or even archetype analysis, any sort of psychoanalysis, you sort of treat the horizontal as a social domain. How does everyone relate to each other? How does a particular artist consciousness want to relate to the rest of society? And the vertical would be something more cosmic, something existential, something mystical, and particularly because of no ideas about ascending to something, transcending something, elevating, and reaching that. So something like a pure vertical, as you can see over here. I'm going to keep coming back to this, even though I have more drawings, because I think this is a very good it's a good summary of their ideas. And it was the largest scale, like the biggest one over there. Everything else was like proofs and prints in a smaller scale, but and that's the only one with a bench in front of it, with a good view, good lighting. Everything was perfect. I think that's why I spent more time drawing this. So I also believe that the artist thinks that grid-based compositions are beautiful. There's something intrinsically beautiful about grids. I personally like, excuse me, when I think about composing something, with all due respect, think of making an artwork, I feel like you use grids as a student, and then you need to go beyond that. You can't rely on grids the same way in abstraction. You can't rely on um, strong lines to direct the eye and achieve balance or rhythm to compose, because I feel like that's what you do when you start off. Later, when you go into depths, I feel like the you create the grids through intuition. You don't have to do the grids anymore. But then it's the approach over here is very different. It's almost like an emphasis. The artwork is saying grids are beautiful, and I use the grids, but then I also want to tell the world that I believe that grids are beautiful. I want to tell the world, I want to tell my students, I want to show everybody how beautiful these grids are. So they've really entered into a different kind of domain. They're not just using grids for a particular effect, but the grids are speaking for themselves. They're making a very strong statement. Then if you think about this dendritic neuronal structures, how you would connect, when they keep saying neural networks, I mean more like literally fibrous roots branching, and then that talks about community, communitas, interconnectivity. And for me that sort of I think landscape of meanings emerge because of the work. And of course, when you look at the work, you wonder if it has some psychedelic features. But I don't think that's necessarily so. I'm not sure about how to comment on that, but for that, I need to know more about the artist, their life, and their attitudes, their philosophy. If they were, if I could somehow reach out and talk to them for a bit, and then I was like, okay, then I can understand. But those things are not possible right now, so this is what we have, only speculations. And of course, for me, it was very interesting that the grids are perceived. I couldn't get over that fact because as an artist, it really troubles me. I've always used grids in the background. Now I'm facing it. Is it also like mocking me, saying, "Haha, I know your tricks, you buffoon or you clown. I know that you achieved these compositions through the grids, and I'm showing our trade secrets to the world." Is it something like that? This is it's very funny and amusing to me. So, clown as a protagonist, clown is also a symbol, an archetype, and a metaphor that recurs throughout the work. But then, in the Great Clown in particular, they're the protagonist. It's very clear to see that because of the size and also the perspective, the way the eye goes, and of course, once the fourth wall is broken, I feel like it creates orders of awareness, which means on one hand you're aware that there is a clown in the work, on the other hand you're aware that the artist sort of intends you to be the clown, and finally you're aware that you are aware of all of these things. So it's creating that layering. And sorry to make a small jump here, but then if you think about this layering and this perspective and this creation of depth, why is there such a strong background, such a strong middle ground, and such a strong foreground? Why are there these layers? Then I think about how intaglio is done in itself, the layering, and then I'm making that connect between the process and the things that the work is able to say. Isn't that really cool that there is a complete resonance, a complete match between the artwork itself and the process through which the artwork was created? For me, there's some. So when I initially saw the works, I didn't like it. The reason is I was like, okay, there's an artist over here. They've gotten a show. It's the artistic, I think, jealousy. Like I'm just like, when will I get my turn? When will I get my turn? So I was obsessed with myself, and I was not able to enjoy the artworks at all. But then luckily, I can keep going to the exhibit again and again, and I can keep studying, I can keep drawing, and then finally, I know at some point I forgot about myself. I stopped thinking of myself as an artist or a student. I just stopped. And then there was this immediate entering into the world of Krishna Reddy, their exhibits, their works, and that's when I started enjoying the beauty of the works, and that's when I started writing these things and thinking about it, because at it took some time for me to forget that, you know, that I came here to do something. There was like so much intention behind, you know, how I feel like in this writing over here, they talk about J. Krishnamurti, and that whole idea of like doing something with a particular purpose, doing something with an intention. Just forget about that and just see something as it is, seeing a flower as it is, or seeing something as it is. And that's the moment when these type of thoughts started coming. So that's when I talk about the layering in intaglio and the stages. So what else? Tiling, space filling. That's obvious. When you create a constructed space, you can always fill it up. If I create a chess pattern, checkered pattern, then it's flat. But then I can distort that space, make all sorts of curvatures, and then I can still fill it up. There's like no surprise there. And why are the red nose balls at those particular locations? For me, my reading is like there's supposed to be maybe space-time events when I fix something in a discrete spot. You know, these balls are not, these red noses are not moving around very randomly. They're sort of fixed. There's like a linearity, a sequentiality, and I feel like a causality towards to which they were placed. So, you know, they pull you in, they pull you in. This red nose, all of them pull you in, and then it starts descending. It becomes the abstract ellipse as an element of visual art, but then the red nose as something recognizable and something that you can put on your own nose. So something that's abstract is becoming matter, something that is thought, intention, pure awareness, energy. It's starting to become matter, and you can hold it, you can touch it, you recognize it, you remember it. If I saw a circus event over here, I am here, then I thought about it here, then I started making it here, I drew it here. So I feel like all of these red noses are just like space-time events fixed at certain causal junctures. That's my reading. And what else? Some of these notes are a bit murky to me also right now, because I'm not exactly sure what I mean by creation, occupation, post creation. Oh, right. So I've created the space, and then I start to occupy it after creating that space. That's what I mean when I talk about tiling and space filling, right? Okay. The next thought I had was that there's a very strong volume created. So when I look at this vertical, if you look at the great clown, you almost see like there's a cylinder, there's a volume. And I feel like the top has a very strong volume, but the bottom, there's the ambiguity in whether this volume belongs in the visual art, in within the frame, or is it supposed to enter your reality. So if I use 3 point perspective and my grid lines are like, you know, converging like this, so then I feel like, okay, it's entered my world, it's broken the fourth wall completely, but this is almost parallel. But then does it end and at my feet, does it enter my world, or is it confined to the frame? That means, am I the clown only while I'm looking at this, or am I the clown throughout my life? So that ambiguity was very evident to me. But the horizontal one, right? This particular one, it was not volumetric. There was no volume. For me, it was almost flat when I was looking at it. And I sort of interpret that, you know, that razor thinness as, of course, if I want to have an ellipse motif over there, and I don't want to have like an eggshell, like a cuboid, but I just want to have a flat ellipse, then of course I need a razor thin particular. And if I impose that meaning that this is supposed to talk about social stuff, then maybe I don't want to have a lot of stratification. Maybe I don't want to have that much of like coming out, coming in. But over here I can have up and down. Like, this is spiritual, this is existential, this is personal, individualistic. This is about ascendance, transcendence, and achieving divinity, achieving enlightenment, embodying divinity, all of that. personal enlightenment, and every individual on their spiritual path, on their progress and levels of wokeness, so to speak. But here, I want to say that we are all one, we're all united, we're all same, we're in this thin fragment, in this thin fabric of life. So that would be how I was reading. And I was very intrigued by this particular spiraling motion becoming, of course, when an ellipse is just a circle and a circle is just an ellipse, they're both very close to the same thing. But the way they distort, and then as it keeps circling around, it sort of becomes solidified and becomes the red nose, the clown. Ellipse acquires circularity, reifies into red nose clown. And I already told you about the fool archetype. So I was playfully executing a joke that is orchestrated. And I'm just thinking about comedy or clowning, because there's a very strong metaphor in front of me, and I'm immediately led to think about this. What exactly is clowning? Drama concocted out of misery to abate misery. So you're in a miserable situation and you create drama out of it, but then your purpose also is to make others laugh and sort of you forget about that misery. But then you're actually in a miserable state. You need to be in a miserable state. You need to empathize with the misery completely and feel it completely to actually, let it go, let it pass on, and then turn it into laughter or joy or entertainment or of memory filled with fun and frolic. Then I started thinking, for an early parent, the memories with children are eventful and memorable. They carry the significance due to the alertness and tenderness of circumstances. The artist becomes semantically alert and phenomenologically receptive to the world of metaphors. So I was thinking, why did this metaphor become the rhyme that is unbroken throughout the career? It's not easy for an artist to say, I want to talk about this particular thing and I'm going to keep talking about it for year after year after year, because the world is so full of inspiration, so rich with meaning and significance and beauty. It's like you spend so much of your life around one particular aspect, one particular theme, explore its nuances and subjectivities, its meanings, subliminal meanings. I feel like something transformative has happened over there. So then I start doing a deeper reading. I mean, here I haven't written much. I'm just talking about the how the Karuna Rasa is transformed into the Adbhuta Rasa, and it's something that it's very peculiar to talk about that, I think, but I have to, because I'm in India and there's no other way to talk about that. There's no other description of what exactly happened over there. There's no other articulation that is sufficient, I think. So I'm trying to abstract and read this. The clown audience becomes the clown, and so I'm trying to put it into like, okay, first order awareness becomes second order awareness. How it gains that secondness through the entering of the clown role, immersion. I mean, in the first order, I think you know that you're faking it, and in the second, you're like self-conscious. It's like, how am I perceived? Does everyone know that I'm faking it? Does everyone see me as a clown? Am I a clown? Like, I feel like that happens when you look at a work like this. So, this is the same thing, immersed in dukkha, the misery, and then how you can use art and aesthetics as a mood for contemplation, and then you become immersed in the performance. You're just thinking about all the worries and the perils of life, and then suddenly you're able to use this as a vessel, as a medium, a cathartic release or a distraction, and then you're able to enter the world of performance. And actually, in the world of performance, you're able to resolve a lot of these, some of these, maybe I am able to resolve. I don't know about you, but into the world of performance, you're able to find solutions because you're not hyper focusing on that particular challenge or particular problem that you're dealing with, the struggles. You've entered a world where the struggles are subliminal, they're the subtext, and they play out, and depending on the resolutions over here, how the tensions are resolved, how the tensions are actually created, that's all about art aesthetics. But then how they're resolved, that's about the artist's vision and the artist's sensitivity, ability, all of that, empathy, their ability as an artist. I think their gift is that particular resolution, and you're able to enter subjective terrain of meaning, finding, discovering, so on. um I just, when I talked about a vessel, also you can think about it as a mystical horse, or the rider, as those are the different archetypes that one works with when you talk about art making, because awareness is riding some, your embodied awareness. That's it's a little irrelevant to this point, but it's like a side note for me to think about. So I'm just entering, okay, I'm worrying about life's problems. I entered this abstract universe with very navigable structure. I think that's a very strong feature of Krishna Reddy's work, because a lot of people create abstract universes, but how can you navigate it? And then you worry about the emergent narratives in the universe, because of course your nature is to worry. You keep worrying, and I don't mean worrying in the entirely, like, it's not a Sisyphean I'm suffering kind of worry. It's more like a preoccupation. It's a tendency to mull over, to contemplate, to think, to obsess over something, to sort of be, I think, to be alive. Worrying for me also means to be alive. And so you're grappling with life's problems, you're grappling with the problems in this particular narrative, which are the same thing, but you don't necessarily need to realize it. So then, this, what I'm saying is, one, you can read it as my thoughts on the exhibit, but also my thoughts in general through the exhibit, because of the exhibit. If the exhibit wasn't there, none of these things would have happened, right? I wouldn't have written any of these things. So when I write life is an emergent autopoietic narrative, then I, this is a definition, or this is a statement that came through the exhibit. So does it belong to me? Does it belong to the exhibit? I don't know, and I honestly don't care. So of course the problems in the artistic universe, in the abstract universe, it has to do with subject, pictorial space, who is embodied phenomenologically, and so on. And when I talk about, what is this, problems worry, art entertains. Art entertains without fundamentally altering the broody atmosphere, and seldom offers real catharsis resolution. What I was telling here. Maybe I should just read what I've written instead of trying to explain everything. Um, I'm also revisiting these thoughts. It's been a really long time since I wrote this. So and this was the color field ideas, foreground, background, what is pushing, what is pulling, the resolving of the tensions. This is when I think about art in a mathematical sense, this is how I would read it. What is the angularity? Where are the groups of interconnected visual motif for regions? I'm using group in the idea of group theory, like, where exactly, because these I can impose a coordinate system on them. I can put a centrality, and if there's like a variation, there's like white over here, there's red, I can have some clustering going on to figure out which is the visual, in terms of visual density, which is actually the center. So there's all of these um, algorithms I can run in my brain to figure out what exactly the group is, a fixed identity of a group. So yes, you can talk about art in a very mathematical way, and it's perfectly valid. It does not do anything to disrespect the aesthetic domain. It's just, it's kind of funny, because this is some of the mathematical theories that I'm writing here down there. Um, so the upwardness, I feel like, okay, spiritual accomplishment. Then I'm talking about topological color field functions. So that's also the something else you notice. It's like the colors were not random. That much I can tell you. Um, what colors are where? A lot of basic color theory principles are used. And if you have a color wheel, and then you have particular geometries, like if I have a triangle, then I know what colors are there at the nodes, and then I use those colors, I achieve a certain effect. So a lot of that is happening. And within the same proofs and prints, like if I do multiple editions, I'm actually maintaining, even if the color hue value is, sorry, hue is varying, there is consistency in value, tonality, and so on. So that's not easy, by the way. I can't imagine how long somebody would have had to do prints, and how long somebody would have experimented to say, to achieve a mathematical ideal in art. You need to know what you're doing. It's not random that much. And it's very annoying that people think that you can't um, read artworks like this, because it somehow spoils the experience. You're just supposed to feel it, look at it, and then just go, wow, be awe, like a little child, just wonder and then move on. For me, the intellectual aspect of art is so crucial to the aesthetic enjoyment of an artwork. Otherwise, I don't see the point in buying it, keeping it, collecting it, talking about it, showing it to people. It helps me think, and that's my personal stance, I guess. And I feel like it should be a universal stance, and that's why I'm intellectually arguing for it, or even doing this, right? I'm showing you that this is possible, and I also think it's beneficial, it's beautiful. So I started talking about, I call this the progenitor ellipse, and I'm saying, okay, I'm reiterating to myself, just emphasizing, it's razor thin, and remember, it's the horizontal social slice. It's tubular, it's vertical, and then there's some ambiguity over here. Where does it end? Then there are bands of color. Think about spectroscopy, strata, stratification, the different bands of color. The social is also suggested to a razor thin. The presence of a pure vertical is an auspicious marker of spiritual accomplishment. I say this because it's not only in Krishna Reddy's work, but you can see it in a lot of works. And you're free to look at it. You're free to read about all of these um, ideas, but also you're free to read these elements in different works. Perspective is used as an efficient way to enter the visual art experience. The uncanny adherence to conventional space creation, with stable curvature and regular continuity, periodic distribution, opens up the semantics of perception and affords the cognitive state of art appreciation. I think that's a bit self evident. This is something I wrote recently on another reading. Using the poetics of conventionality while being at the technical avant garde, KR deals with primitivist use of natural compositions with timeless appeal. So these compositions have timeless appeal, as you can see from any old masterworks, and even even multicultural examples exist of the same grids, the same proportions, and you think about the fine tuning problem, about why certain constants have certain values and why these values even exist at all. Why is the universe so beautifully ordered at these precise numerical junctures? And then you see that same thought echoed in visual art when you put it in that particular grid. Why does it look good? I'm not able to really tell you why. I can say it does. I can keep saying it has to do with how beautiful flowers are, but then a flower and an artwork based on the same grid, I'm still not able to get to the ontological significance of that ratio and that proportion. That's what I mean by natural compositions, the timeless appeal. And when I say primitivist use of them, it's like you've gone at the root of it. After I don't know what kind of drawings you would have done, but then after drawing all of that stuff, you've just gone at the root of what exactly beauty is, and you're using it. And you're using it as our ancestors would have used that same um, ratio, the same proportions. And they're at the technical avant garde, right? If you're saying you're a pioneer in intaglio printmaking, then not only are you pioneering something that is peculiar to printmaking, but also in a technical system in terms of how art can be used as a technology for enlightenment. You're at the avant-garde of it. Not necessarily that everyone has to know about it. Not It's something that you're there, and you know it. So it's your presence, it's what you are. But then you think about how a lot of avant-garde art, conceptually, semantically, existentially, it shocks you. It makes you think, what, this is art. And I'm especially referring to a lot of postmodernism, postmodernist experiments, Dadaism. A lot of these things can shock you. But then you're at the technical avant-garde, but you're using very conventional poetics. So for me, that's, I don't know how to say it. It gives me a lot of joy, little goosebumps. It's like there's this ambivalence, the duality. It's like looking at a dichotomous, just opening something up and seeing that there are two sides of it harmoniously balanced. On one hand, you're doing something so radical. On the other hand, you're doing that radical thing with very conventional aesthetics. I don't know what exactly led to this direction, but it's very enjoyable. So a rhyme unbroken, for me, it's like a promise, and I've written innocent over here. So continuity implies to me hereditary, lasting, eternal, legendary, resilient, obsessive, devoted, patient, tried and tested, sedulous. And a rhyme unbroken, sort of, in a very literal sense, it means every word rhymes. If a rhyme is never broken, every sentence or every phrase will rhyme with every other. So every artwork resonates like pearls on a string. It's the same motif or same spirit infused at every juncture of practice, a continuum of pinnacles, a legacy of consistency. That's what I wrote finally. It's pedagogically useful art, at least. I was still, apprehensive about what is the value of this art? Like, is this really art? Or is this art that I would enjoy? Honestly, I want the vision. That's the work that I want because it's really cool and I would love to own it. But the rest of it, I would not really want to revisit it or go back. It's my personal opinion, and we can debate about that. But then, for me, it was pedagogically useful art, at least. That's what I wrote about it. They use eternal themes like duality, rhythm, abstraction, perspective. I'm very intrigued by these unmutable events, unchanging, discrete structures, red noses at skewers, fixed, exact event. That's what it's evoking for me. There's some exact event over there because it's fixed on a skewer. It's not a moving red nose. It's not bouncing up and down. It's not abstracted or hazy or murky or blurry. It's very there. The legs are like conical stilts, and that reminds me of bones, the real inner essence of a person, but also getting that abstraction out, showing you what somebody is inside. And also, so I wish I had a pen over here, but think about it. If all of these lines are here, and this is like a flat space, but then I can create so many lines over here and then less lines over here, then I've created like in terms of visual density, I've created emphasis over here. Then I do the same thing horizontally, many lines over here and then less lines over here. So the way your eye moves, like it enters into the space and then it just like falls. It's smooth, and then you get that depth, you get that oomph, you get that there is something important here. And you can see that in their work, a lot of the visual mm, effects are used for semantic uses, like semantic uses, semantic the semantically significant element in a frame and that visual effect, they both occupy the same coordinate. What I mean is, if there is a red nose, or if I have eyes over here in the two clowns, if you remember that particular composition, then the visual density of the lines is highest. The lines are closely packed around the eyes. So you look at the eyes, and of course, the eyes are important, the eyes are significant. So that's what I mean when there's like a semantic mass, a density, and it seems to bend. Like if you talk about space-time curvature, and there's like huge amount of mass concentrated somewhere, then that dictates that dictates the dynamics of the space, like the physical properties of the space and so on. And over here something similar is happening when there is a semantic, you know, mass, when there is something significant, a significant metaphor, a significant motif, a significant element, when there is something that the artist wants to focus on or emphasize, that's where the lines are bent, that's where the space is bent. And for me that was, it was awesome. Because these are like so simple to do, but then hard to actually think of. It's hard to actually have something to say. It's like on one hand you have all of these techniques, but then what do you do with these techniques? What do you want to say? It's really like you need to experience a certain kind of a life. You need to have certain kind of thoughts. You need to have a certain outlook towards life. You need to have reached a certain, let's say, spiritual level, accomplished something over there in that domain to have a world to express. Otherwise you just have a handful of skills and tricks in your bag, but then nothing to show, nobody to show it to. It's just that kind of a fragile existence, almost a useless one, I think. But there it is. You could be a teacher, I guess, that way. But here, never mind. I'm deviating a bit. But then when I talked about the space creation over here, there's also the organicity that occupies that, what I say, meticulous mathematical space. Like, I've created the space and I know how different elements behave. The audience will be in tiling, they'll be fixed in that, space filling kind of element. But then if there's like a motif that wants to flow out, there's like a fluid dynamic kind of motion going on, then it's going to still comply with the rules of the space. And I found it very interesting that you have these grids, and then they sort of hug the grids. There's something, the grid is not organic, the grid is extremely geometric, but then what happens around the grid is organic. It's like a plant grew over there, or fungi started, in patchwork, they started exploring that grid, they started growing on that. It's like you have a window, and then a spider came and left cobwebs all around the grids. So you have something very brutalist, something like Bauhaus approved kind of horizontals, verticals, planarity, angularity, all of that. And but that's just the space. It's empty without life. And what happens is life comes there and starts occupying those features, hugging those grids. So you've created a template for life, but then life has to come and enter that world for you to actually know what life is. Otherwise it's blank. It's an empty universe without anybody. Okay, now I can go two directions with this. So these are some of the thoughts that I summarized, but the more in-depth thoughts that I have are here. And unfortunately, I did not have a paper that day, so I had only one of these, which I got on the opening night. And I was like, okay, I need to really write this down before I forget it. And I've written it all over here. And like you could see, I struggled with reading what I have written on rule sheets. So I'm going to struggle a lot over here. But I think there are at least a few significant thoughts that I haven't been able to touch upon. Like over here, I was really exploring the sounds I'm getting. Like a clown nose, like pong, pong, pong. And then I'm getting the audience like ha ha ha, almost like a chortling laugh, an angelic choir. So if I took this painting, or if I took this, sorry, the print, the work, and I wanted to make it accessible to people who do not have access to the visual sensation, and I wanted to create an audio, like, let's say I have this plate, and then depending on where I am, I hear different sounds, then I can do that, because in such a rigorous mathematical space, it's so easy for me to, like, if I hear a clown nose over here, then I know this is the region where something like that's happening. Over here I can hear the audience laughing, and you know at different bands of colors, I could have audio. It's very easy to create audio to this. I think that's one of the hallmarks of what makes mathematical work. You can convert it through different sensations. Something purely visual can become purely audio in a consistent manner. There's a one-to-one relationship between these elements. That's what I mean. um, I don't know what to do because I want to tell you all these thoughts. Otherwise, they're wasted if nobody reads it or nobody gets to understand it. And I also want to think about them. But then I have already spoken for 55 minutes. So I guess I'll just leave it. It's very interesting. But then we've spoken a little too much, I think. And maybe that's enough for now. For now, to convince someone to. Okay, let me just show you some of the works, and maybe we can try understanding um, what grids are here. Like maybe you want to measure this and then see where this arc is dropped, how exactly this space is constructed. Like if I put an arc over here and drop it, it's going to come here, right? If I put an arc over here and drop it, you're seeing why exactly I'm talking about these in terms of um, those type of compositions. If I measure this space, this space, this space, you're seeing why exactly these spirals are located on these particular lines. It's because they have that harmonious um, I think that would be root 2, root 5, root 3, those type of grids. I'm not sure. I have to measure them to understand what exactly is happening, but that would be like a preliminary. Just looking at it, that's what I feel. And this is what I was talking about when I said I have the highest concentration of lines over here. So this mask, that's what I want to look at. And then it's around the eyes because the concentration is here. And then that's where the red nose comes. That's where the ellipse becomes the red nose. And I just did like 2 colors over here. I think, sorry, 3, excluding the white. Oops. That's from Invisible Visible, a study of MFO Sense, Padmini Mohini Ragni. Right, this is my favorite one, obviously, the vision. And I sort of distorted the proportions. These were the actualish proportions, and I've sort of tried to fill the space with that because I still wanted to get the effect. And you can see there are these performers, the pinball head, the bony legs, and they share the legs, they share the limbs. The limbs are always shared. This is a very good strategy to get rhythm, and because you want to repeat these bodies, but then you draw 3-4 hands, it's excessive, it's unnecessary. But then you use only 2, you make them share the hands, then it's useful, it's beautiful, it's elegant, and it means something when all of these people are sharing it, the same body. It's like it can talk about nationhood, it can talk about community, it can talk about people, it can talk about unity, it can talk about interconnectivity. You've entered a different world. And you can notice how the body is abstracted to almost represent the internal organs, and like the intestines. You evoke that through the colors, through the way the patterns flow. And I'm writing here corrugated color texture, hands. When I'm thinking about, okay, someone is seated, then I can say the strong horizontal. Someone is standing, running, the verticals are evoked. I do like that. The color theory was really fun. It's not bold. It's not like radical, or it's not pushing anything. Really, many of the colors are standard color theory combinations. And in that way, the grids are also standard compositions. So there's a lot of standardized. That's what I mean when I say poetics of conventionality. Poetically, the whole thing was very conventional, the artworks, the rhythms and the movements. But I'm just going to show you some of these sketches and the sunflower ones. Of course, the colors over there look very different. I'm using brush pens, and these will be very vibrant. And I'm also like, this whole thing is yellow, right? The yellow is the dominant color over here. But then I want to understand the grids. I want to understand why certain things are there. You can see really beautiful tiling over here. Very similar to how you would actually see what you would see in a sunflower under observation, under not even microscope, even the naked eye observation could show you those geometries, those features, the hyperbolicity. um, there's a lot to talk about right here. There's so much sacred geometry packed over here in this particular, you know, this much. I think that's why this has particular color band. Um, it's not why it has it, but um, the strong arc over here. Actually, all of these are kind of color developed through these arcs, but this arc is emphasized. Again, why? It's around the eyes. Literally, you can see the arcs. They're not hidden or anything. The grid clearly shows. I'm not like making this up for to fit my narrative. Some of it I might have, force fitted a narrative onto it, but at least in the visual domain, in terms of how the space or the composition was created, I'm not I feel like I've not. Never mind. You might want to count how many are there and so on, but I wouldn't say these are actually like good drawings, because the proportions might be different, and that's because of my own lack of skill, to be honest. And initially I was like, okay, I want to show you these things and help you read them, but just maybe think about everything I've said and try to understand or try to read the artwork in those terms and see what it brings. It's not like you have to always look at the artwork through these readings, but then if you do, whoops, okay, maybe there are some other sketches from map. Okay, this is my favorite sketch that I've done, because finally I said, okay, now I've drawn enough, I understand enough of how the space works, but can I evoke what is happening? Can I stop copying the work just to study, but can I sort of like try to feel the essence of the work and achieve something? So I feel like I did it over here, but it's up to you to agree or disagree. But this is when I stopped. I haven't really gone to the exhibit again after this, because I was like, oh, I'm here. I feel it, and I was very happy when I did this one. And there's a lot to talk about. Uh, I think that's it. Yeah, there's no the there's the only no. Maybe I'll just look through this and see if there's something so essential. This is kind of a little doodle of how that space would be created for me. You're entering into the visual art. We're talking about this one, because this is the first one I drew, and you're entering the visual art like this, and then you're coming out into the world. That's how the space is. Literally, the perspective lines. That's how they go into the viewer. The social sharp to dethin, unity, utopia, strong vertical line, sharp. Yeah, a strong vertical line does imply a sure path to transcendence. So if you think about a lot of religious iconography, spiritual iconography, and visual art as an aid to spiritual practice, and perhaps, like a clue to enlightenment, then when you put a strong vertical line, it's like suggesting, that doesn't mean you just put a vertical line, but when you do it really well, It's suggesting to the viewer or the consciousness that is observing and perceiving it, it's suggesting that don't worry, you're going to get there. There's like a optimism and auspiciousness for that. That is, it's like a sign, it's like showing you a path. So people who do witness it, witness these artworks, and they're receptive to this message, they're able to enter into that meaning. It doesn't have to happen consciously. So what we're doing is we're deconstructing it, analyzing it to death, and this is all wholly unnecessary. Anyone can just feel these things, I believe, by looking at the work or engaging with the work in alternative accessible ways. um, then I'm talking about how juggling is about choices, events. We need to put it in a probability space. You're juggling, so you are making choices, and there are these events, the choice to even go see this. The very discrete moments, stories, lives, seconds, measurable information, matter in noetic domain, sensitive to. Honestly, my handwriting is really. And it's been so long since I wrote this. I'll just skip that word. Conditions where agency based space time matter activity reconfiguring operates on memory. What's memory? Ah. Use of abstraction for playfulness like a whale teasing a view. Maybe I'll repeat that. Use of abstraction for playfulness like a whale teasing a view. Wondering about spaces, position, hierarchies of power, curvature of space, topological space with domain-based properties to domain-based properties for interaction, I think. Discrete features, hands, claps, applause, viewers, PO, point of view, position of audience, first order awareness, story perspective, grid based composition, eternal sacred geometry concept based proportions and symbolisms, semantics is highly structured, spaces accurate to physical dynamics, strong indication, proficiency in neural pattern representation, clown, ambiguity, immersion, essential performer, self consciousness, first order awareness, being self conscious, second order awareness, drama concocted out of misery to avoid misery, telling space, laughter joke that is orchestrated, audience becomes clown, secondness. I don't really. It's very hard for me to make sense of this now. I have to think through this all over again. Immortal clown, perfect clown, clown, symbol for mystical performer, inquiry into the real, OG clown, performers, idiom for, of, labor, plurality, movement, repetition captures rhythm like carved stone, art has dancers, apsaras, damsels, metaphysical, existential, pure vertical, divinity, ascendance, transcendental. This is how I would view the space. Clown quintessential, quintessence of clown embodiments. Like a Nalanda type pattern, yeah, Apsara, damsel, temple. Depictions in visual culture of performer, social. I'm just reading what I can at this point. The sounds that I wanted to hear, maybe. I want to hear a spotlight over here, a viewer, a real performer, protagonist, and over here I wanted to hear crackling neural firings and electricity. I wanted to hear an angelic choir in this domain, and then at each of these specific points where the audiences claps like a chorus arch clown, like yay, good job, woo, applause, that sort of encouraging thing, like a cute laugh somewhere, and then at the noses that very tacky clown nose, the red nose pom pom, that the sounds that they used to use in old films, so something like that. And you have greens, you have blues, you have pinks over here. So at these particular bands, you could have that immersive sound, and then at those particular junctures, along with the immersive sound, you could have very some a sound that is more. It's not like a surround sound experience. That would be like a surround sound, and over here you would have very palpable, on the nose, forgive the pun, sound. And on the pure vertical, of course, you could have that. That's why the angel require like transcendence and blah blah blah. And on the social, like chatter or some secular democratic sounds, if that makes sense. I know it doesn't. I have very specific sounds that I'm hearing, but it's very hard for me to describe them, let alone create them. I've written here, I'd rather be a clown in a world of clowns and give you a clown's view to show how our actions affect each other and make sure we understand our interconnectedness. So I'd rather be a clown in a world of clowns and give you a clown's view to show you how our actions affect each other and our interconnectedness and make sure that we understand our interconnectedness. Hearing I've written here a visual frame, a border, it challenges or baits you. That's the tension that you step in. You become the central role of the protagonist. You hear the claps and the audience, and the layering of space. I cannot read this anymore. What? Ellipse as a progenitor. Yeah, that makes sense. This is a popular idea of holding or sitting in zazen in the Buddhist position, and your only duty is to hold a perfect ellipse, the mudra. Your hands would make that ellipse necessary to social enlightenment role. Layer of intaglio, layering of space, techniques, method, grid based, timeless, communal, inherent beauty of composed hints, a vocational preference, compositional hints or tools, enters into visual semantics, utilizes clown performer placed at the bottom, break the fourth wall, viewer cognitively identifies as subject, protagonist being sensitive to artist's intention. Yeah, it's like you can resist when you look at this painting. You can say, I'm not the clown, I'm just looking at a work, blah, blah, blah. But you understand that the artist intends you to, to be the protagonist. I'm a bit tired. It's been 1 hour since been speaking. Speaking is fine. It's the analysis of all of this mess and trying to make sense of it. It's like someone else wrote it. The ellipse becoming the nose. I was very delighted to see that. I think that's why I keep writing it, keep drawing it like that. Look, you clown, your choices are entering my world and making fools of all of us. The fools themselves and fools. The fool fools themselves and fools the audience into fooling themselves to the point of perfect eternal tomfoolery. I think that's what I got from this particular work. It's like you stop resisting and then you say, I am the clown. I am juggling these red noses. I'm juggling them. These are my choices. And then it's like, look, you clown, your choices are entering my world and making fools of all of us. The fool fools themselves and fools the audience into fooling themselves to the point of perfect eternal tomfoolery. So this aspect of eternal Leela, I think that's coming in. The claps, the ecstasy of the masses, and the claps are really nice because I hear them in that particular black. You can hear the applause. Rejoice, jovial, cheerful, cheeky, merry, ellipse, horizontal, sublimity of clowning, loss of second order. I think most of it is what I've said already. Properties of flow, this gooey, splash, spread, generative goo distribution, occupies volume, aesthetic space, ordered through tiling, complicated through material interaction. Yeah, I think that's one thing I didn't say. I told you about how you have a constructive space, it's rigorous, it's meticulous, and it's ordered through tiling. And wait, I did touch upon this. And it's complicated through the material interaction. I did say how it's a blank canvas, it's empty, it's a template for life, but then through these material interactions, like this particular goo over here, it's different from the grid itself. It's growing on the grid, it's coming out of the grid, but it's touching the grid, hugging the this grid line and this little rectangle. So it's like, complicating the orderliness. Right. And also here, like an explosion, when the visual density reaches, like that threshold element, when I keep layering lines after lines after lines after lines, and I put them so close to each other, it becomes like a black spot, just the way that a dot after dot after dot becomes a line. So I feel like that's when the surface is created. All of these lines come together, but I hear like an explosive aspect over here when all of these lines converge, and they're not converging, the parallel lines are becoming more and more concentrated. There's an explosive quality to that moment. That's what I mean when I say it matches the semantics of that emblem or that motif or that icon, whatever is there, whether it's the eye, whether it's the progenitor ellipse, whether it's just a red nose, or you can see the way this is like literally ascending. There's one of the other thing in one of the Apu's, um, the composition shows a descending, like as if being mortal or being a child, even though a child is pure, it's the pinnacle of joy, wonder, curiosity. Just the fact that you set foot on the earth means that you've fallen. you know there's this reverence for spirit or non material, um I wouldn't say existence, but a transcendental, eternal, cosmic body which does not have anything to do with materiality, as if entering into the world of materiality was a foolish choice. In samsara over here, I sort of analyze the movements and the flow, in, up, out to you. I apologize. I'm really not able to make much sense of most of this, even though invoking a sacred circle, yeah, in sacred geometry and tantra mysticism, the circle has so much of, it's a spiritual clowning, definitely. Intent to ascribe establishes viewer as performer protagonist, and at least displays an intention to ascribe that role, for sure. Circle, invoking sacred circle for recurrence, eternality. The audience becomes clown, viewer becomes clown, be clown, clown nose, red nose, maybe mostly circles everywhere. Personal connect with clown, emotional connect with clown, up to the visual semantic space, out into reality, high key plausible pathways, surplus pathways ensuring achievement of enlightenment. Maybe I'm just musing on the same ideas again and again over here. Well, let's just stop for now, and yeah, I'll leave you with. I'm not sure what exactly I have done over here, but I don't mean the drawings or the writings. I mean what I did right now, talking into this strange video for so long, but I hope it was informative or at least mildly entertaining, and I'll leave you with the thought that everything I said is it's just foolish, it's just buffoonery, it's just for fun. There's a lot of sense in it, but it's the sense of the past. It doesn't mean anything now. Now you can just After all of this, you can look at the work for itself and enjoy its beauty. Now that I've left you with this world of thoughts, thoughts, thoughts.